So today we're going to talk about how to bounce back from overtraining. I think this is kind of like the silent killer in the strength training world. And a lot of people don't necessarily understand what it is or realize that it's happening. And I think it's one that affects newbies just as much as it affects like people that are more intermediate or advanced and have been doing it a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. I just recently have kind of come out of a deficit, and I mean, you guys know, and have been kind of secretly, not so secretly, nudging me towards that. And it's like I just had aesthetic goals, but it was just becoming too much. I'd been basically just too low on calories for too long, and it just caught up with me. And I was starting to suffer, like my sleep, especially. I really noticed that. And then, yeah, I mean, once your sleep is screwed up, everything else is going to kind of follow suit. But my work, like I was just not recovering as well. I just felt just not as optimal as you'd want to feel. And then, I went on my honeymoon and I had like a week or so off. And I came back and I felt just like a lot better. And it's like I'd eaten more. I'd like de-stressed. And so, yeah, we're going to kind of dig more into that and like what the average person can kind of go through. But we even fall victim to it. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, Ben.
For sure.
I mean,
Yep.
we had to talk you out of that.
It's something I'm constantly dealing with and trying to be a little bit more aware of. And so I guess, so we're going to talk about what does optimal look like, which is really just what is the best, what is the right dose that is going to produce the results that you want versus what is tolerable. Because sometimes we're doing far more than what we need to be doing. And we are exceeding optimal. And actually what we find is the more you're doing, not only is it you're not getting equal results for putting in that extra effort, but you're actually oftentimes backsliding. You're actually getting less results for putting in more time or doing too much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tricky because optimal is not just like a cookie cutter thing, right? Optimal not only changes from person to person, but it just changes from day to day.
I was going to say, even for the same person, it's moving. It's a moving target.
It always is. There's so many variables that go on that change optimal. And so what we want to try to explain to you is how to have better awareness and get a gauge on when you're maybe overtraining, and then how to combat that. So if you kind of come to the realization that you're like, okay, based on these signs, I think I might be overtraining. What do you do now?
Yeah. So what are some of the signs?
Well, for one, you're getting crap sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Your energy levels are probably low. Your libido is low. You're probably not moving up in weight like you would want.
When your progress is stalled.
Your progress is stalled, yep. Or your fat loss is stalled. Just stalled progress in general.
And I like that you said your fat loss, because a lot of times we'll just look at the scale. Mm-hmm. And as long as we see, if we're trying to be in a deficit, if we're trying to lose weight, we'll see that number go down and we're like, okay, I'm still making the progress I want. And it's like, you could just be paring down muscle just as well as fat.
Yeah. I think sometimes people, when they're seeing the scale go down, they can ignore all of the other indicators that aren't good. Mm-hmm. Right. So, if you're on this regimen, you're going hard, but you can't sleep, you feel like crap, you're inflamed, your libido's gone, you're fighting all these cravings, but the scale's going down. Oftentimes people overlook all of those things that are actually setting them further back and leading them to a more unhealthy result just because they're seeing the number go down the scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's so tricky because it's like one of the best ways to measure progress, but also one of the worst ways, one of the worst numbers to focus on. So,
right.
And really, and for that reason, I think one of the best indicators or really things to track on whether or not you're progressing is just based on your strength, right? Mm-hmm. Are you getting stronger in the gym? And if you're not, that often is the lead indicator that you're overtraining or need to dial things back.
Right. Well, and even like for Zach's example, when he was in a deficit for so long, him simply being able to maintain his strength is a good goal. Not that he's going to progress in strength in that way, But like if he were to ever see himself just steadily losing his strength, then like obviously you would know that you're overtraining.
Yeah, big indicator that I'm losing muscle as opposed to just body fat.
Right. Yep.
And, I think it's important for the average person to understand that what you're doing when you're lifting weights, when you're resistance training, is you're creating a stressor. And now your body has to not only heal from that stressor, but also adapt and get stronger. And so when we're overtraining, essentially what's happening is our body is under so much stress that it is putting all of its energy just to heal, just to get you back to where in the first place. But there's not enough left in the tank to actually adapt and grow stronger than it was in the first place.
Yep. So like you're going to be working out, you're going to be getting sore, you're going to be feeling, oh, I did a good workout. And then you're going to be doing that time and time again weeks later, and you're going to be doing the same workout at the same weight.
You feel just because like, well, this was hard.
It was hard.
Yep.
Exactly. But like you're just giving your body just enough time to heal, but not enough time to adapt.
Yeah. The guys from Mind Pump always say that, where it's like you want to do the least amount of work to get the same amount of results. And that's something that we try. It's a tough thing to try to tell people, where it's like, no, try to do less, especially when they're just so motivated to like, oh, I'm going to change my life. And it's like, it's not only is it a baby step, but it's just like you have to allow your body to adapt.
And I think people don't believe it, right? I think that's the struggle of it, because I think the average person, if we said, actually, what you need to be doing to get the progress that you want is not necessarily a massive amount. It's not necessarily a huge time commitment. You just need to do things right and at the right pace and at the right dose for you right now.
Oh, right.
And I think most people, they would love to believe that that's true, but they just don't necessarily see that. They see in our culture this no pain, no gain, go harder, David Goggins type of stuff, and feel like that is the way to get there. But oftentimes those people that you see that are talking about that, they're showing their crazy, hard, intense workouts that they're doing. That's not their day-to-day workouts.
No, that's a seasonal
They're showing the
thing.
highlight reel.
Yeah, that like athletes, you often think of that, but it's like even they have an off season.
Right.
And it's like they're not constantly pushing the pedal to the metal, but what they are doing is they're being consistent. And their off season doesn't mean that they stop going to the gym or stop exercising. They've just really dialed that back. It's not an off switch. I say this all the time. It's a dial. And you got to dial it back. And it's, it's difficult. It's difficult to know when to do that, especially like when you're in the routine and you don't want to be thrown off and you feel like you're crushing goals and stuff, but all of a sudden you stall and you don't want to admit it to yourself that you've plateaued. And so you're just like, I just got to like work through this. I got to eat more. I got to do that. And it's just,
or eat less and work out more. Just got to do a little bit more.
Yep. So we're going to share 5 steps now to what to do if you found that you have overtrained. So step 1, take a week off. I'm actually doing this right now. And what does that mean, take a week off? Does that mean scale things back for a week, take a little bit easier this week, do a little bit less sets? No, I mean like truly just take an entire week off. When your body needs to recover, that time is very valuable. But during that week,
make sure that you eat like shit.
Yeah.
And you just lay around on the
eat
couch.
terribly, be a couch potato. But during that week, it's important to still move, to actually allow your body to recover by getting that blood flow, by moving, taking walks, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like what you said, couch potato. You're not just completely being sedentary. You just, movement's medicine. And that will help you just kind of stick with the routine of like, oh, I'm still exercising. If that becomes like an issue with your like the mental kind of aspect. I know a lot of people like to pump the brakes, but that's a great way to just like go for a walk, get some vitamin D if you can, if it's not winter. But yeah, definitely don't completely hit the brakes.
Oh, right. Because a lot of times what happens is you stop working out and your diet falls apart because, you're only supposed to diet when you're working out, right? And like, that's not the case. You still stick with your diet. So being able to like stick with movement, stick with, yoga or just going for walks is going to allow you to still stay in that right mindset where you're going to be able to stick with your diet a little bit easier.
I still remember when I was like 13 and I was first into lifting weights, a friend of my parents, he was into lifting weights. And so I was just drilling him on everything, trying to learn. And I remember asking him like, I didn't work out today, but I made a protein shake. Like, should I be having protein shakes on days that I don't work out? You know, like, and that I really think is sometimes people are still thinking in that way, right? Like, should I be getting like enough protein and, you know, all this stuff like that? If I'm not working out, does it even make sense? And the answer is totally. I mean, you should be getting that protein every day, regardless of doing strength training or not.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, that's truly healthy living. We often get caught in the whole all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm completely victim to that, where it's just like, oh, well, why would I try to get the supplements that I need and the protein that I need if like it's not being used to help repair the muscle? Because I don't even break down the muscle, but it's just, that's a cyclical thinking, and it's not conducive to healthy living.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Step number 2, get your sleep in order.
This one I feel personal.
Yeah, right.
I think I'm doing better than both of you on this one.
Yeah, right. As I'm pounding caffeine.
Which caffeine is a big part of that. You know, if you're taking this week off and you're trying to get recovered, one thing that probably is going to help the most with sleep is taking this also as a time to either dial back or cut your caffeine. You know, caffeine is definitely not the devil. Love caffeine, but if you can take some periods of time where you do cut that back,
it should be cycled.
You're going to get more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You should have maybe a higher week where you
I
have
feel
some
like
high intensity, some lower sleep, but then you should be cutting it back, you know, when you're cutting other things back. So like a perfect example, taking that week off is a great time to do that.
Yeah. When I had quit caffeine for like a week or two, and then I had told you, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to have an energy drink. And the way that it actually fueled my workout for once, it wasn't just like this, oh, I'm just kind of slightly peeking my head over the brain fog that I normally have for this workout. It was like, I am ready to go. And I had that for, you know, the next month or so, whenever I'd have caffeine. Mm-hmm. And then slowly it would become a daily thing. And then I would kind of dip back down in that brain fog that I have that wouldn't really like get me out of it. And it just became like second nature, like, oh yeah, just my small pick me up instead of what caffeine could be used for, which is a useful tool to help fuel your workout.
Yeah.
And I'm mostly just looking at it for what it is based on the numbers, you know. So if you count up your total average caffeine take, you're like, okay, I'm normally getting 400 to 500 milligrams of caffeine. Dial that back to 100, and see how you feel. Dial that back to 50. You know, a cup of coffee is what, 60 milligrams. A bang is probably 300.
I think it's like 80 for a cup of coffee, something like that. It's closer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So play around with those a little bit.
There's this content creator, TNF. I think you saw him. He's the all natural. Really like him, science-based kind of stuff. But he was asked, what is one thing that you recommend to all of your clients that you don't adhere to? And he was like, oh, it's definitely the caffeine. He's like, I am telling them all the time, like, wean yourself off, get off it. And they're like, what's your daily intake? And he's like, on a low day, he's like, probably 600. Wow. And he's like, my higher days, he's like 1,000 or more. It's like, wow, dude. And that's like, I wouldn't expect our clients to be that on caffeine, but I mean, there's people out there, and I mean, they rely
I used to
on
do
it.
1,000.
A high day for me is like 600 or so.
Yeah, that's high for me. There was a lady at our local coffee shop who would come in like every morning through drive-through, and she would get it was like 11 shots of espresso in a cup. She was like known for that.
Is it legal?
I know. I remember seeing her at my former job.
Yeah. At what point is the coffee shop liable for this? Like over serving somebody on
I don't know. Well, I think like it's not like the whole charged lemonade like Panera thing, because it's just this is just lemonade. It's like this. Can I get 11 caffeine shots? Is basically what you're asking for. So it's like they obviously know what they're getting, and I'm sure that they like started with that because I think she was like a nurse or something like in the medical field, and she's like getting to work early in the morning, you know, as soon as this coffee shop opened up. She was like one of the first people in drive-through, and it was just, I remember seeing her at my former job, and I was like, you're famous. She's like, yeah, shot girl. She's seeing through time.
All right, so step number 2 is getting your sleep in order. Step number 3, bump your calories and protein. Reason that being is that really the goal of this recovery period is to reduce as many stressors as possible, right? That's why we're pulling back or completely removing strength training. That's why we're working on sleep. If you haven't got a lot of sleep, that's a big stressor to your body. If you're in a calorie deficit, that's also another stressor to your body. So pulling yourself back up to at least a maintenance or possibly a surplus during this period of time is going to allow your body to recover the best, while additionally keep hitting your protein goals, because that's how we're going to preserve the most muscle during this period of time. And I think at the end of this week, you're likely going to see yourself come back stronger, more muscle, more strength, more energy.
Yeah, what I'm afraid of clients hearing when we say like indulge more, like bump your calories up, that they're like, their thought process is, okay, bulk. And then when they think of bulk, they think of dirty bulk. And they're like, I just need to get more calories.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat whatever. And it's like, that's not what we're saying.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's getting more calories, but it's just like having more of what you're already having that's healthy, but allowing like, oh, you can have that banana and apple. You can have that, peanut butter toast, something that's still going to be like decent. That's not going to be like completely processed.
Not a pint of ice cream.
Yeah, just junk. If it's Halo Top, maybe.
In general, you always want to be living with the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
Right. You want 80% whole foods, 20%, enjoy it. That's life. But yeah, exactly. You still keep that 80-20 concept in your mind. You just allow yourself to eat more food.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
Well, yeah. So last night we had gotten some ice cream and gotten Ben and Jerry's. We usually get Halo Top. So I was just, I can eat a whole pint of Halo Top, no problem, and it's not too terrible.
It's 300 calories.
Looked at the back of Ben and Jerry's.
It's like 1,070 or
100 grams of sugar plus.
No way, dude.
1,400. It was crazy.
Probably over 100 grams of sugar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Debbie's was like 105, and then mine was 80 grams of sugar.
Oh my gosh,
it's just insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing where that simple swap out, right? If that is your indulgence and you like to have just that tub of more fancy high-end ice cream, like I'd love that. So yeah, just an easy swap out for like a Halo Top. Now you're 30 grams of protein. Yeah, and the taste is, fractionally less good.
Or invest in a Ninja Creamy. I love mine. Like that thing is, it's awesome. I can have ice cream. You can make whatever you want. You know exactly where you're getting into it, and makes it's like a pint and a half, 2 pints. Like it's a lot of ice cream in one thing. Besides that, I wanted to kind of touch on that whole where the stressor that you're putting yourself in when you're in that deficit. It's not just a physical stressor that we're trying to get you out of. It's a mental one to constantly be analyzing food and even when you're hungry, okay, what can I have? And decision fatigue where you're just I'm still wrestling with that, even though I'm in this recovery period where I'm allowed to eat more calories and I have snacks and they're all healthy. But I was just I caught myself last night. I was just oh, I'm still tracking my calories. I'm keeping a mental note where I was oh, if I have a banana, and it's I kind of want a PB&J, but that'll really put me over and I don't want to overindulge. And it's just I started stressing myself out about that. And I wasn't eating anything, even though I was hungry, because I was just oh, well, what should I do? And just allowing myself. So I ended up just having an apple and some cheese, and that tied me over. And I still felt I wasn't so focused on it, but it's I went with the healthy options first. And then I was okay, I'm no longer hungry. As opposed to oh, well, I'm just going to make the unhealthy thing because I want that. But it's just, you can really get caught in the stress of counting calories and stressing about that. And it's just not, that's what we were trying to get you out of.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. If you're at a place where you feel a little bit obsessive in what you're doing, if you're stressed, if you're missing, you're missing family events because you got to get this workout in, if you're not going out with people because you're stressed at the idea of going to a restaurant, those would be clear indicators that you're just not in a healthy place with it. And that taking a break and just allowing yourself to mentally recover is going to do you a lot of good. So step number 4, now that you've taken that week off and you're coming back to it, how do you come back? Now, if you're in a place where you've been overtraining, you've been doing too much. And so we would really advise coming back with a lot less volume than you prior were. which is going to allow you to slowly work yourself back up.
Because you're just going to be hitting 1 rep maxes. It's going to be a lot less volume, a lot more effort.
We're expecting your strength to be really out there.
Because I think we can get this idea that if we come back and we're doing less, we're not doing as much, that we're so scared of falling behind, right? But that sort of thought process is what got you to overtraining in the first place. So when you come back with half the volume.
Mm-hmm. I also think that's a big sign of someone being obsessed with the goal and not the journey. Because once you start falling in love with the journey and the process, and you're not so fixated on it, you're not worried about this, like, oh, I'm going to backslide. It's like, you enjoy this. Of course, you're taking a week off because you're just dialing it back, and then you can dial it back to, to a 5 when you come back. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, well, if I fall off, then like I won't reach my goal. And it's like, it's not like, obviously it's good to have a goal and it's good to have something to reach for, but it's like, this should be a lifetime thing. This should be a complete habit. So it's like, you're never completely falling off. You can have a week where you're just deloading and just dialing it back. And then that shouldn't stress you out, because you know that you're not falling off. And I think that you have the wrong mindset if that's a constant worry, like, oh, if I take a week off or if I dial it back, then I'm probably just not going to I'm just going to not come to the gym ever again. It's like, that's,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to what we talked about earlier, how doing as little as possible to get those results, it's going to prevent you from hitting those stalls and plateaus. Like, as if you're going balls to the wall, like as hard as you can, you get some results, you're going to hit a hard plateau where you're going to have to make some serious adjustments. Whereas if you do as little as you can to keep moving forward in those results, you're going to be able to sustain that a lot further and get those results a lot further, and before you hit a stall, before you have to switch things up.
If you're properly programming your workouts and doing everything right, you're never going to overtrain, and you're never going to necessarily have to be in a place where you have to do that. And you mentioned deload weeks earlier, and that is something actually I think we should separate. A recovery week like this is different than a deload week. Deload week is something that you should be doing continually throughout your programming. That, if you're running, let's say you ran 12 weeks on aesthetic, a really high volume workout program, you're going to benefit a lot from then taking a week where you really do dial the volume way back, do some exercises that are a little bit more recovery, a little bit different ranges of motion. And that should just be an ongoing part of your workout programming. If you're always pushing week after week, month after month, especially if you're always staying in the same planes of movement, that's how you're going to lead yourself into injury. It's how you're going to lead yourself into overtraining and needing to do this in a more harsh way. Cool. So step number 5, slowly increasing your volume over time to bring yourself to an optimal place.
Yeah, it's we were talking about that yesterday, like all the different ways to kind of implement progressive overload, and that could be more volume, that could be more reps, that could be more weight, but it's like we said, you kind of introducing yourself with like a lower volume, and then finding that optimal and the sweet spot. And optimal isn't going to be like you hitting all the sets at all the highest weight. It's going to be what you can take.
So stay in your lane.
Yes.
It's going to be different for everybody.
Yep.
Don't look at the next person, thinking, well, they're doing this. You're a different person.
It's like medicine. Everyone has a different dose. We're not one size fits all.
Unless you get over-the-counter medicine.
Yeah.
Which is just...
You're right. So the way in which volume is typically measured, it's what you guys just said. It's weights times reps times sets, right? But I would also say I think there's a fourth thing that should be added in there that really, to me, it's weights times reps times sets times form. Because ultimately, if you're not executing that movement at just kind of like maximal muscle connection, or your range of motion is severely limited, you just lack the mobility in order to get into, a squat's a perfect example. If you're stopping, pre 90 degrees and you can't connect further than that, you just hit a stopping point. Your overall volume, and I would argue, is less than somebody that's doing less weight than you, but allowing themselves to go deeper and has a better connection.
Absolutely. Well, for an example, I had a client yesterday. I was training 2 people, and the one was moving up in weights, and I was moving the other one up in weights. And I started to realize that they were coming down just a little bit less than their squat, just a quarter of the way less. I'm like, okay, so I think strength-wise, you're fine, but I really want to solidify this technique in good form. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dial the weight back again, and I want you to focus on getting as far down as you can and in that squat before we start moving up in weight.
You don't need to be in a rush to move up in weight.
Right, exactly.
And so this is the perfect time as you're coming back to maybe self-check a little bit. Like how is my form actually doing? Am I really getting down there in a squat? Is this deadlift actually correct? When I'm benching, am I really connecting to my chest or my shoulders getting involved?
Mm-hmm. Right. And like that's it's really hard to self-monitor your form and technique sometimes. Even us as trainers or coaches, we struggle with that with ourselves. Like we're so easily, able to check other people's form and technique, but sometimes we struggle with that ourselves. So getting a second pair of eyes on yourself, or really doing a body check. Is this bothering me? Does this joint hurt? Does my knee hurt in this? Like really paying attention to your body so that you can self-analyze that stuff.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Well said.
This is bogus.
So there you have it. 5 steps to take if you've been overtraining, and how to understand and read your body to know if you're overtraining.